Anotherway, Erasmus Plus Program, Cooperation for Innovation and the Exchange of Good Practices. KA2 Strategic Partnership for Youth, funded by EU, number 2019-2-IT 03-KA205-016466. Co-funded by the Erasmus Plus Program of the European Union. Mediterranea, Associazione per lo sviluppo locale. This work is licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike 4.0 International License. To view a copy of this license, visit http://creativecommons.org or send a letter to Creative Commons. P.O. Box 1866, Mountain View, CA 94042, USA. Per altra via. Anotherway. An original method by Francesco Piccolo. Module 2. Hosts. Lessons 3 and 4. Ethics of Tourism. The previous lesson ended with the reference to an ideal of tourist. This is because, in reality, there is no unique and exhaustive definition of who is the tourist. And frankly, for us at AW, I don't think it is so relevant. The various definitions, in fact, differ according to whether the person stays out of the house or not, whether his tour takes place in his country or abroad, whether he does it just for fun or he travels with other purposes. I have deepened the research, and in bibliography you will find some titles, because I thought it was important to understand who was the person to whom I wanted to offer my services, who was the tourist. But none of the definitions found convinced me. I am convinced that this is because the various definitions found respond to the need to study the phenomenon of tourism as a social, anthropological, but especially economic phenomenon. But we do not have to study the tourist, but offer them a service. So, whether the tourist comes from 10 kilometers or 100,000 kilometers, what difference does it make to us? Whether you stay one night or 10 nights in a hotel or a friend's house, how will it affect our work? Whether you are moving with your family or with a heterogeneous group of people? Does it really matter to us? When a person, as an individual or part of a group, stay in front of a tour guide to enjoy his services, it is the tour. That person, from the guide's point of view, is the tourist. So even for us at AW, who design and create tours, the tourist is simply the user of our work. Where he comes from, how he arrived, how long he will stay in our land. We are not interested. His intentions, the purpose for which he is in our land, what kind of behavior he takes on. All this concerns us closely because he enters into what is the ethics of tourism. This is the focus of today's long lessons. I propose the Global Code of Ethics of Tourism, adopted by Resolution A/Res/406 13th at the 13th World Trade Organization General Assembly, Santiago, Chile, 27th of September to 1st of October, 1999. I have read it in depth, and this code inspires me, and I stick to my method. You must confront it too in order to follow the rest of the codes. Some articles directly concern us, and in fact, I will highlight them by voice and graphically. Others remain important even if not directly related to AW. Read it, discuss it in groups. If you have any questions, ask your trainer or me through the usual routes. Global Code of Ethics of Tourism, adopted by Resolution A/Res/406 13th at the 13th World Trade Organization General Assembly, Santiago, Chile, from the 27th of September to the 1st of October 1999. Article 1. Tourism's contribution to mutual understanding and respect between peoples and societies. 1.1. The understanding and promotion of the ethical values common to humanity, with an attitude of tolerance and respect for the diversity of religious, philosophical, and moral beliefs are both the foundation and the consequence of responsible tourism. Stakeholders in tourism development and tourists themselves should observe the social and cultural traditions and practices of all peoples, including those of minorities and indigenous peoples, and to recognize their worth. 1.2 Tourism activities should be conducted in harmony with the attributes and traditions of the host regions and countries, and in respect for their laws, practices, and customs. 1.3 The host communities, on the one hand, and local professionals, on the other, should acquaint themselves with and respect the tourists who visit them and find out about their lifestyles, tastes, and expectations. The education and training imparted to professionals contribute to a hospitable welcome. 1.4 It is the task of the public authorities to provide protection for tourists and visitors and their belongings. They must pay particular attention to the safety of foreign tourists, owing to the particular vulnerability they may have. They should facilitate the introduction of specific means of information, prevention, security, assurance, and assistance consistent with their needs. Any attacks, assault, kidnappings, or threats against tourists or workers in the tourism industry, as well as the willful destruction of tourism facilities or of elements of cultural or natural heritage, should be severely condemned and punished in accordance with the respective national laws. 1.5 When traveling, tourists and visitors should not commit any criminal act or any act considered criminal by the laws of the country visited, and abstain from any conduct felt to be offensive or injurious by the local populations, or likely to damage the local environment. They should refrain from all trafficking in illicit drugs, arms, antiques, protected species, and products and substances that are dangerous or prohibited by national regulations. 1.6 Tourists and visitors have the responsibility to acquaint themselves, even before their departure, with the characteristics of the countries they are preparing to visit. They must be aware of the health and security risks inherent in any travel outside their usual environment, and behave in such a way as to minimize those risks. Article 2 Tourism as a vehicle for individual and collective fulfillment. 2.1 Tourism, the activity most frequently associated with the rest and relaxation, sport, and access to cultural and nature, should be planned and practiced as a privileged means of individual and collective fulfillment. When practiced with a sufficiently open mind, it is an irreplaceable factor of self-education, mutual tolerance, and for learning about the legitimate differences between peoples and cultures and their diversity. 2.2 Tourism activities should respect the equality of men and women. They should promote human rights, and more particularly the individual rights of the most vulnerable groups, notably children, the elderly, the handicapped, ethnic minorities, and indigenous peoples. 2.3 The exploitation of human beings in any form, particularly sexual, especially when applied to children, conflicts with the fundamental aims of tourism and is the negation of tourism. As such, in accordance with international law, it should be energetically combated with the cooperation of all the states concerned and penalized without concession by the national legislation of both the countries visited and the countries of the perpetrators of these acts, even when they are carried out abroad. 2.4 Travel for purposes of religion, health, education, and cultural or linguistic exchanges are particularly beneficial forms of tourism, which deserve encouragement. 2.5 The introduction into curricula of education about the value of tourist exchanges, their economic, social, and cultural benefits, and also their risks, should be encouraged. Article 3 Tourism, a factor of sustainable development. 3.1 All the stakeholders in tourism development should safeguard the natural environment with a view to achieving sound, continuous, and sustainable economic growth, geared to satisfying equitably the needs and aspirations of present and future generations. 3.2 All forms of tourism development that are conducive to saving rare and precious resources, in particular water and energy, as well as avoiding so far as possible waste production, should be given priority and encouraged by national, regional, and local public authorities. 3.3 The staggering in time and space of tourist and visitor flows, particularly those resulting from paid leave and school holidays, and a more even distribution of holidays, should be sought so as to reduce the pressure of tourism activity on the environment and enhance its beneficial impact on the tourism industry and the local economy. 3.4 Tourism infrastructure should be designed and tourism activities programmed in such a way as to protect the natural heritage composed of ecosystems and biodiversity, and to preserve endangered species of wildlife. The stakeholders in tourism development, and especially professionals, should agree to the imposition of limitations or constraints on their activities when these are exercised in particularly sensitive areas, desert, polar, or high mountain regions, coastal areas, tropical forests or wetlands, propitious to the creation of nature reserves or protected areas. 3.5 Nature tourism and ecotourism are recognized as being particularly conducive to enriching and enhancing the standing of tourism, provided they respect the natural heritage and local populations and are in keeping with the carrying capacity of the sites. Article 4. Tourism, a user of the cultural heritage of mankind and a contributor to its enhancement. 4.1. Tourism resources belong to the common heritage of mankind. The communities in whose territories they are situated have particular rights and obligations to them. 4.2. Tourism policies and activities should be conducted with respect for the artistic, archaeological, and cultural heritage, which they should protect and pass on to the future generations. Particular care should be devoted to preserving and upgrading monuments, shrines, and museums, as well as archaeological and historic sites, which must be widely open to tourist visits. Encouragement should be given to public access to privately owned cultural property and monuments, with respect for the rights of their owners, as well as to religious buildings, without prejudice to normal needs of worship. 4.3. Financial resources derived from visits to cultural sites and monuments should, at least in part, be used for the upkeep, safeguard, development, and embellishment of this heritage. 4.4. Tourism activity should be planned in such a way as to allow traditional cultural products, crafts, and folklore to survive and flourish, rather than causing them to degenerate and become standardized. Article 5. Tourism, a beneficial activity for host countries and communities. 5.1. Local populations should be associated with tourism activities and share equitably in the economic, social, and cultural benefits they generate, and particularly in the creation of direct and indirect jobs resulting from them. 5.2. Tourism policies should be applied in such a way as to help to raise the standard of living of the populations of the regions visited and meet their needs. The planning and architectural approach 2. And operation of tourism resorts and accommodation should aim to integrate them to the extent possible in the local economic and social fabric. Where skills are equal, priority should be given to local manpower. 5.3 Special attention should be paid to the specific problems of coastal areas and island territories, and to vulnerable rural or mountain regions, for which tourism often represents a rare opportunity for development in the face of the decline of traditional economic activities. 5.4 Tourism professionals, particularly investors, governed by the regulations laid down by the public authorities, should carry out studies of the impact of their development projects on the environment and natural surroundings. They should also deliver, with the greatest transparency and objectivity, information on their future programs and their foreseeable repercussions, and foster dialogue on their contents with the populations concerned. Article 6. Obligations of stakeholders in tourism development. 6.1 Tourism professionals have an obligation to provide tourists with objective and honest information on their places of destination and on the conditions of travel, hospitality, and stays. They should ensure that the contractual clauses proposed to their customers are readily understandable as to the nature, price, and quality of the services they commit themselves to providing, and the financial compensation payable by them in the event of a unilateral breach of contract on their part. 6.2 Tourism professionals, insofar as it depends on them, should show concern in cooperation with the public authorities for the security and safety, accident prevention, health protection, and food safety of those who seek their services. Likewise, they should ensure the existence of suitable systems of insurance and assistance. They should accept the reporting obligations prescribed by national regulations and pay fair compensation in the event of failure to observe their contractual obligations. 6.3 Tourism professionals, so far as this depends on them, should contribute to the cultural and spiritual fulfillment of tourists and allow them, during the travels, to practice their religions. 6.4 The public authorities of the generating states and the host countries, in cooperation with the professionals concerned and their associations, should ensure that the necessary mechanisms are in place for the repatriation of tourists in the event of bankruptcy of the enterprise that organized their travel. 6.5 Governments have the right and the duty, especially in a crisis, to inform their nationals of the difficult circumstances or even the dangers they may encounter during their travels abroad. It is their responsibility, however, to issue such information without prejudicing in an unjustified or exaggerated manner the tourism industry of the host countries and the interests of their own operators. The contents of travel advisories should therefore be discussed beforehand with the authorities of the host countries and the professionals concerned. Recommendations formulated should be strictly proportionate to the gravity of the situations encountered and confined to the geographical areas where the insecurity has arisen. Such advisories should be qualified or cancelled as soon as a return to normality permits. 6.6 The press, and particularly the specialized travel press and the other media, including modern means of electronic communication, should issue honest and balanced information on events and situations that could influence the flow of tourists. They should also provide accurate and reliable information to the consumers of tourism services. The new communication and electronic commerce technologies should also be developed and used for this purpose. As is the case for the media, they should not in any way promote sex tourism. Article 7 Right to Tourism 7.1 The prospect of direct and personal access to the discovery and enjoyment of the planet's resources constitutes a right equally open to all the world's inhabitants. The increasingly extensive participation in national and international tourism should be regarded as one of the best possible expressions of the sustained growth of free time, and obstacles should not be placed in its way. 7.2 The universal right to tourism must be regarded as the corollary of the right to rest and leisure, including reasonable limitation of working hours and periodic holidays with pay, guaranteed by Article 24 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Article 7.d of the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. 7.3 Social tourism, and in particular associative tourism, which facilitates widespread access to leisure, travel and holidays, should be developed with the support of the public authorities. 7.4 Family, youth, student and senior tourism and tourism for people with disabilities should be encouraged and facilitated. Article 8 Liberty of tourist movements 8.1 Tourists and visitors should benefit, in compliance with international law and national legislation, from the liberty to move within their countries and from one state to another, in accordance with Article 13 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. They should have access to places of transit and stay, and to tourism and cultural sites, without being subject to excessive formalities or discrimination. 8.2 Tourists and visitors should have access to all available forms of communication, internal or external. They should benefit from prompt and easy access to local administrative, legal, and health services. They should be free to contact the consular representatives of their countries of origin in compliance with the diplomatic conventions in force. 8.3 Tourists and visitors should benefit from the same rights as the citizens of the country visited concerning the confidentiality of the personal data and information concerning them, especially when these are stored electronically. 8.4 Administrative procedures relating to border crossings, whether they fall within the competence of states or result from international agreements such as visa or health and customs formalities, should be adapted so far as possible so as to facilitate to the maximum freedom of travel and widespread access to international tourism. Agreements between groups of countries to harmonize and simplify these procedures should be encouraged. Specific taxes and levies penalizing the tourism industry and undermining its competitiveness should be gradually phased out or corrected. 8.5 So far as the economic situation of the countries from which they come permits, travelers should have access to allowances of convertible currencies needed for their travels. Article 9 Rights of the workers and entrepreneurs in the tourism industry. 9.1 The fundamental rights of salaried and self-employed workers in the tourism industry and related activities should be guaranteed under the supervision of the national and local administrations, both of their states of origin and of the host countries, with particular care given the specific constraints linked in particular to the seasonality of their activity, the global dimension of their industry, and the flexibility often required of them by the nature of their work. 9.2 Salaried and self-employed workers in the tourism industry and related activities have the right and the duty to acquire appropriate initial and continuous training. They should be given adequate social protection. Job and security should be limited so far as possible, and a specific status with particular regard to their social welfare should be offered to seasonal workers in the sector. 9.3 Any natural or legal person, provided he, she, or it has the necessary abilities and skills, should be entitled to develop a professional activity in the field of tourism under existing national laws. Entrepreneurs and investors, especially in the area of small and medium-sized enterprises, should be entitled to free access to the tourism sector with a minimum of legal or administrative restrictions. 9.4 Exchanges of experience offered to executives and workers, whether salaried or not, from different countries, contributes to foster the development of the world tourism industry. These movements should be facilitated so far as possible in compliance with the applicable national laws and international conventions. 9.5 As an irreplaceable factor of solidarity in the development and dynamic growth of international exchanges, multinational enterprises of the tourism industry should not exploit the dominant positions they sometimes occupy. They should avoid becoming the vehicles of cultural and social models artificially imposed on the host communities. In exchange for their freedom to invest and trade, which should be fully recognized, they should involve themselves in local development, avoiding, by the excessive repatriation of their profits or their induced imports, a reduction of their contribution to the economies in which they are established. 9.6 Partnership and the establishment of balanced relations between enterprises of generating and receiving countries contribute to the sustainable development of tourism and an equitable distribution of the benefits of its growth. Article 10 Implementation of the principles of the Global Code of Ethics for Tourism. 10.1 The public and private stakeholders in tourism development should cooperate in the implementation of these principles and monitor their effective application. 10.2 The stakeholders in tourism development should recognize the role of international institutions, among which the World Tourism Organization ranks first, and non-governmental organizations with competence in the field of tourism promotion and development, the protection of human rights, the environment or health, with due respect for the general principles of international law. 10.3 The same stakeholders should demonstrate their intention to refer any disputes concerning the application or interpretation of the GCET for conciliation to an impartial third body known as the WCTE. In this lesson, the images are used for educational purposes only, and for the most part are original. Those for which it has been possible to identify the source are mentioned in the image itself. For the others, the author remains available to give credit to any rights holder who requests it, using the following address: peraltravia@gmail.com.